What is up, you guys? Welcome to Illumination Lab. My name is Justin, and welcome to a new series we're calling Digital Junkyard. In this series, we'll take 3 pre-made assets from Kitbash with completely different styles, and we'll break those assets down and make something completely new out of them. In this project, our goal is to make an alien crown, and we'll be doing so by using these 3 kits. I'm excited for this one. This is going to be a fun one today. So without further delay, let's get into it. Alright, so kicking off the Rotor Crown project here, we are pulling up Kitbash here, and we're going to find those 3 different kits that we have seen in the beginning. And so with this series, what I'll do is I'll just take one item from each kit, and then we'll kind of blend them together and kind of create something new here. So first off, for the crown, I like this one because it creates a pretty good base as far as the overall crown goes. And so I kind of like how this is, and so we'll kind of use most of this here to kind of create the foundational piece of the crown, and then we'll add a few different things to kind of make it a little bit more unique in our own. So next one coming up, we are going to hop into this one here, and I think maybe something like the airport here would be nice, just so we can have so much to kind of pick from here. And so especially with this, I'm thinking of doing some sort of motor or just kind of an industrial feel when it comes to this hat here. So definitely not so much fabric oriented or even anything that makes real sense, but just something a little bit more kind of whimsical here. And so we do have this kit as well. As you can see, there's quite a bit of options if you're not familiar with Kitbash here, but I think maybe something big. We'll just go ahead and do this stacked apartment here, and we will pull this in to Cinema4D here. So all right, so now that we have all of our assets imported here, I'm just going to go ahead and kind of move all of these off to the side here, just so I can kind of separate this out, and we can kind of get started on one and then kind of turn off the others until we need it here. So now I'm just going to kind of zoom into this asset here. And then, like I said before, this will kind of be the foundational piece for our crown here. Again, I'm just going to highlight this one and then turn off the other ones here. And then, of course, with working with these big assets, I'm just going to remember to save it quite often, just in case this does end up crashing on me. So again, I'm just going to zoom in here, and we are going to go in and start kind of playing with this. So and then what I'm going to do is just start with kind of cutting a lot of this out here. And so again, this is our foundational piece for our crown here, and so I'm just going to cut out a lot of these here, just kind of make room for the front part of this crown here. So ideally, with a lot of these arches here, I want to have that kind of sit on top of our alien. And then again, I'm just cutting out a lot of this just so it's not blocking the face. And so think of this almost like a helmet of some sort right now. And then we're just kind of deleting a lot of these parts here that we really don't need. And with this process, usually it takes a little bit longer just to make sure that I'm actually kind of cutting out the correct pieces here, and I'm not breaking any part we want to keep here. So but this is looking pretty good so far. I think what we'll do is it'll look a little bit better once I bring the alien in. And so I'm just going to give it a quick save, and then I'm just going to hop into Meshy and import our alien here. So this is the alien that we're going to bring in. And so I just went over to Meshy and created this real quick. Nothing too fancy with this. Again, our main focus is going to be on the crown, and then our alien here is just going to be our nice model that is going to wear this crown here. So I have our alien here, and I did name it alien. And then what we're going to do is just shrink down our crown here. And then just a little bit more here. Now I'm just going to kind of fix this to the head here. So it looks like what we're running into is the alien does kind of have a longer head here, where our crown is a little bit more narrow. So we will definitely go in and kind of bend that so it looks a little bit better. But really with this, I'm just trying to get the general idea of where this is going to sit along the head here. We could do something like back here, and then just kind of do a quick 360 to see how that looks. And then I can also make this a little bit larger too. Let's see. We could kind of push it up forward a little bit, like something like this. I think I like that a little bit better. And then we do have that back portion of the head kind of sticking out, but we'll definitely fix that here. But I think having the crown pushed up a little bit more is kind of what I like a little bit more here. So cool. So I'm just going to give it a quick save again, and then I'm just going to bring in a bulge here and just kind of make that a child of that knoll there. And then I'm just going to select fit to parent. And then as you can see, as we kind of play with the strength here, it does kind of change how it is on the alien here. So, and I kind of like how this is kind of stretching a little bit more, so it looks like it's fitted to the alien's face here. And then what I'm going to do is just copy and paste that same bulge and bring it down here. And then we can kind of move this up here and kind of see what effects that has. Of course, we can expand it, and maybe we'll do something on the back here so it kind of stretches out. But I think we're going to do something like this, where we kind of push this off to the side, where it kind of slicks back and kind of works a little bit more with the head here. And I'm just kind of looking around here just to make sure that I'm kind of liking how that looks. Of course, there is a lot of stuff we have to cut out still, kind of make this work. I'm kind of just getting the general idea of the shape that we want to do here. So, but kind of looking at it here, I kind of like how it is. I think it's a little bit more kind of shaped to the alien's head, which is good. But we definitely need to make some minor adjustments here to make it look a little bit better. So I'm just going to give it a quick save again, and we're just going to select this here, and we're just going to start deleting this bottom portion here. So most of this bottom part, where this is kind of like a little ramp area and stairs, we're just going to kind of clear out all of this here. I'm just going to take a quick second and kind of delete all of this, and we will be right back here. And then I'm just going to kind of delete some of this on the top here. So I'm just going to select all of these. We're just going to kind of delete all of that there. And then we'll do the same thing as well. And then let me just kind of switch out of that mode and just kind of see what we're looking at here. We did get a lot of different cuts. We didn't mean to. So we can do one of two things. We can either back up to the point where we actually didn't delete a lot of that stuff, or we can restart in general, or we could just be a little bit more mindful of the camera and how we're going to render this out, so the camera necessarily doesn't see all that stuff. So then I'm just going to go back and delete all of this just to make it symmetrical. And then we'll bring this back here and then just kind of fit it to the dome. Cool, so that does look a little bit better, and that right side there isn't torn, so that is quite nice. So what we'll do is we'll actually turn this one back on over here, and we'll just bring this over and we'll just kind of scavenge around and see what we can do here. Again, for this alien, I want it to be something a little different here. I think maybe like with a religious spin, and maybe the species is really into like turbines in general. I don't know, maybe with this species of alien, they had a lot of turbines early on, and it really helped out as far as their agriculture and their growth goes. Maybe the turbine is something else. Maybe it is some sort of religious symbol of some sort. And so maybe on a crown like this, that is much more ceremonial versus actual, like an actual hat you would use on an everyday basis. Maybe some sort of turbine, or the idea of the turbine has something that ties in with a specific religion or a specific ideology. But I think we'll just take that idea as more of a foundational concept, and then we'll kind of take it from there depending on what sort of artistic direction we want to go into, or what kind of creative direction we want to go into. So I did find this one here. I do like this just because of these tubes, and so I think if we can connect these tubes or utilize a lot of these cables, I think that would be pretty cool. As of right now, I don't know really my main idea here as far as like what it's gonna look like, so we'll just kind of let the process kind of dictate what this is gonna look like, even though we do have some general ideas of what we want to go for. So similar to our last process, I'm just going to take this one here, and we're going to just start cutting this up here. And again, I want to take this tube here, so let's start deleting a lot of this stuff just so we can kind of have this tube here. So all right, so I cut it out, and this is what we have right now. So what we could do is we could do something where we kind of put this on the top and kind of have a lot of different tubes kind of on top of the crown, or just kind of around it here. So we can rotate this, kind of bring this down, and then maybe do something like that. I don't know. Let's see. Let me just turn this here. We could do this from the back here, so let's see what this could look like. We can maybe do something where this is kind of attached to the back of the head. And then I'll just kind of rotate this just so it's kind of even to the back of the head, as if it's kind of connected to the back. Yeah, maybe something like that. And then I'll just kind of fix it just so it's a little nicer on the back there. Let me see. And then I'll just rotate this again, and then just kind of bring this up. And then so maybe like that. adjust this. And then it looks like it's not cutting into anything, so that is good. Cool. So I think that looks pretty good there. Let me just kind of look at it real quick. And then what I could do is I could maybe just copy and paste this and maybe do like a whole bunch of them over on, you know, the alien's right side here. So I can maybe kind of pull this down and shrink this down as well, just so there's a few different sizes. And then again, just kind of line it up to the back of the head, or even just like the back of the neck there. And then we can kind of shrink that down even more. Maybe to about there. I'm just kind of looking to make sure it's not going through anything, so that looks fine there. And maybe rotate this a bit and kind of bring this up. And then a little bit more in the middle. We could do it there, and then what I could also do is just take this box off here, just so we have a little bit more to work with. And that looks a little bit better, just because we can kind of work with that a little bit more here. And then I'll just kind of readjust this to the back of the head. And then let me just move this real quick, just so I can bring this up here. And then I'll zoom in. And then just kind of bring this more into perspective. Cool. So I'll turn that back on, and then we'll adjust this here. And then yeah, we'll do it to about there, and then I can just go back and delete this stuff here. So let me just go in and delete this. And then I'm just going to copy and paste here, kind of similar to what we did before, but this one doesn't have the actual brick on the end of it. So I'm just going to adjust this to the back of the neck, kind of as we did before. And then we can also adjust the size, but I'm just going to save it here real quick. And then we'll just shrink that down. So maybe about there. Yeah, I actually like that quite a bit there. So what we could do is we could just continue that same pattern, kind of moving up. So we'll just do that. I'm going to copy and paste and kind of move our cable up. And then we'll adjust it. And then I'm just going to rotate this. And then for our last one, we'll just copy and paste and move this one up. And then we can always adjust the size there to maybe about there. So I kind of like it. It could be, I don't know what it could be, but we could definitely, you know, kind of figure out something that kind of goes along with the lore here. But I definitely like the look, whatever it is that we did there. So yeah, it's pretty cool here. So again, I'm just going to adjust this tube just to make sure that it looks quite nice, or just kind of sitting there in more of an interesting way. And then there is quite a bit of junk kind of around our alien here, so I'm just going to go in and just delete a lot of this here. All right, so I deleted a good portion here. We do have some kind of off in the distance, but I can address that here later off camera. And so cool. So I think we created a pretty good foundation here. Let's hop into this one here and see what we can kind of pick apart. Do kind of like these turbine areas over here. We could definitely use that. And I kind of like this top part as kind of being like the main aspect of this crown here. And so we'll definitely use a lot of this stuff here. We're just going to copy and paste, and we're just going to turn that one off as a backup. Cool. So for this, what I'm going to do is we're going to find this middle piece here, and looks like it is this one here. And then there is also this as well, which I do want. So let me just grab all of these here, and I'll just delete those. And then we'll take the rest of these. Let's take all of this. And we'll just delete this here. And then we can delete all of this. And then I'm just going to go through all of these and just delete the rest of these here. Let's go ahead and delete that one too. And then we'll delete this one, kind of bring this back. Cool. So we have both of the models that we are wanting here. So we'll just kind of slide this over, and we'll shrink this down here. And then I'll just kind of fix my camera, and we'll shrink this down as well. Cool. So I'm thinking we'll have this kind of at the top. Let me just adjust it here. And then, yeah, just something like that where we have that on top. And then again, just kind of adjust this. And then we could have it here. I kind of like how that kind of splits those 4 different ways on the head. And then we could actually bring in a taper to that. And then we'll throw that in there. Hit fit to parent. We can always adjust the strength there, so we can kind of mold it to how we want it. We could turn on fillet as well, which is going to kind of give us more of a exaggerated look there, which is quite nice. What we'll do as well is we'll bring in a bulge, and then we'll bring this bulge down, fit to parent, and kind of similar where we can kind of adjust how that is. So I like how it's kind of flaring out a little bit more, and we can really kind of push that to make it a little bit more exaggerated. Or we could do something like that, where it kind of is a little bit more fitted around the head, and then it kind of bulges out a little bit more. And then we could play with the curvature there. Kind of like it with fillet off, and then kind of like how it's also curved out too. And then we could kind of reduce this size down. Oh yeah, we could do something like that where it's kind of curved out like that. That actually looks pretty cool there. Let's kind of see what that looks like. Yeah, I like that quite a bit. It looks like it's a lot more actually fitted to the crown there, so that's kind of a cool look. And then we can even bring it down a little bit more. Yeah, look at that. That's pretty cool. Cool. Yeah, I kind of like that overall shape. Again, it's kind of a little bit more whimsical and just kind of like a little bit different. Like you would normally not see something like that. So I kind of like how off it looks almost. So pretty cool so far, but let's keep playing around with this and see what we can get. And actually what we'll do is we'll grab that turbine as well, and then we'll just kind of bring this out of the null. And then we could maybe, let's see here, let's actually rotate this. Yeah, and then maybe we could kind of line this up to the very kind of top here and do kind of like a, almost like a pattern here where we can kind of have this kind of going along the entire crown here. So I kind of like that idea, and I'm just making sure it's not cutting into anything there. And then let's actually make a null, put turbine here and throw that into the null. And then what we'll do is just copy and paste that null, and then we'll grab this and just move this over. I'm just going to move this down a little bit. We could adjust it so it's a little bit smaller in height, or let's actually kick this down in scale and just see how that looks. Yeah, I think that is pretty cool. So it's kind of like in a descending order going down to the bottom part of the crown here. So I like that quite a bit. So we'll just continue that pattern here. Just copy and paste. We'll move this maybe to here just to kind of line it up properly. And then I'll just kind of make sure that this is sitting in place. We'll reduce the size, yeah, to about there. And then we'll adjust this. Now I'm just kind of peeking here real quick just to make sure that is looking good on all angles. Cool. So let's do the same thing. We'll just copy and paste. And we'll just kind of set this up over here. And we'll just adjust the size to about there. Cool. So I'm just kind of looking at this now, and I think I like that quite a bit here. Let me just adjust this one. And then what we could do as well is bring in some sort of deformer here. So let's bring in a bulge. And then we're just going to kind of knock down the size of this bulge. And then we could do this where we kind of squeeze it a little bit more so it's a little bit more lean. Or we could kind of expand this out as well too. Let's make this a little bit leaner here, just so it's a little bit more exaggerated. And then we'll do the same thing to our other turbine here. We'll just crank down the size here. And then we'll just bring this over maybe about there. And then we'll do negative 15%, just make it a little bit leaner here. And then we'll just turn that off, and then we'll do the same thing for these bottom two as well. So same thing here, just going to move this bulge over, kick this down to 100 each. Line this up. And then we'll kick this down to about negative 15. And then we'll just adjust this here. And same thing with our last one here, bring in a bulge, kick it down to 100. Bring this over. And we're just going to set this to -15. And then lastly, just adjust it here. And then to make this easy on ourselves, what I'm going to do is just select all of these, copy and paste. And then what we can do is just kind of move these over. And let me just reset this real quick. Now I'm going to bring these over and we're just going to rotate them just so they can kind of fit in more of a symmetrical way. So I'm just going to kind of bring these over. Maybe about there. And then we might have to individually adjust some of these. So I'm just going to grab this one. Just going to move this, and then I'm just going to adjust this one and move it over. And same thing with this one here as well. Just kind of zoom in, and we'll just make sure it is right there. Yeah, kind of similar to where we have it on the other side. And then we'll do this last turbine here. Cool, so that looks quite nice there. It's rather symmetrical, which is good. I'm just going to bring in another null here. And we're just going to kind of throw in all of those turbines into that null, just to kind of clean up our object manager here. And then I'm just going to make another null here. I'm going to name it cables, and we're just going to put all these cables into that null. Cool, so a little bit cleaner there. And real quick again, I'm just going to clean up some of these pieces around the alien, and we'll meet back here. All right, so I cleaned up most of that stuff. You could probably still see a little bit left here, but I cleaned up most of it. So I think that will be fine for now until we go ahead and find a composition to kind of render this out here. So let's actually go back to our model over here. Kind of like this here. We could do something quite interesting here. Let's actually move this one over to our alien, and we can actually put it kind of near the front of the crown here. And so again, since I was thinking more of these turbines or just some of these propellers in general is just part of the symbolism within this religion that we're making up here, I think this would be kind of cool as kind of adding in something kind of nice in the front here. Maybe somewhere kind of in this middle area here would be nice. So let's just adjust this. I'm just going to kind of move it so it's not kind of crashing into anything here. So I think kind of like that is the idea, but I'm just going to kind of put this in place. Yeah, I think about there would be nice. And I'm actually going to move that asset to the top here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to zoom in here, and we're just going to bring in a deformer. I think what we could do is we can make this a little bit more whimsical here by maybe throwing in a bulge and just making it a little bit more dramatic. So I like how it's kind of a little bit more like big, kind of distorted a little bit. So let's see here. Kind of like that's how it's kind of distorted out, where the bottom and the top is a little bit more kind of pulled out. You know, the propellers on the side are a little bit shorter and they're just kind of off a little bit, where the ones on the top and the bottom is kind of stretched out. So kind of like that look. It almost looks like kind of like a star. So let's kind of roll with that. Let's hop over here. We do have a few other different turbines and such here, so we can even do something like this. That would be interesting. We can just kind of grab all of this. Going to grab them both and then just move this over. And then I'm just going to rotate this here. To bring this over, and we'll just kind of figure out what we want to do with this here. So I'm just going to bring this one, and actually we could do something where this is kind of the base area of this crown, or even just like the top portion of this crown in general. That will be nice, especially with a lot of this metal that's kind of curved here. So let me copy and paste and kind of play with this. And if not, we do have a extra one here just to kind of use that later. But I think we kind of stumbled on something here, and then maybe we can kind of place it around here. I'm just kind of rotating it just to kind of see what this looks like. Yeah, maybe about there. Or we could bring this down a little bit, so those are kind of near the top of that ridge there. And I'm just kind of making sure that this is centered here. And then I'm just going to bring this over, and we're just going to cut out a few of these pieces that we don't need. So I'm just going to highlight all of this. And we're just going to delete that. And then same with this top portion too. And then we'll just clean up the rest here. Cool. So I'm just going to put this back into place here. Right about there. We could do something like that there. Cool, yeah. So that looks good. There is that back portion we can delete. But I just want to see. Let's see. So we can grab all of this just because we don't need this, and delete that. And I'll just go ahead and delete the rest of this here, and then the sides, and then we'll just kind of clean up the rest. So now we have our main shape here. So we will kind of bring this back. And again, we'll just kind of situate that to the top there. Yeah, right about there. So that looks good. Let me just make sure that it is centered on the top there. Cool. Yeah, so that looks quite good there. We could take our other one that we have here, and we can maybe do a similar pattern that we did to our previous ones here, but make it a little bit different and maybe just offsetting the other pattern. So we could, I don't know, we could do it somewhere here. Yeah, somewhere in the middle. And then we could go and take another deformer, maybe a taper, fit the parents, and then we can adjust the size here real quick. And I'm just going to rotate this. And I kind of like that, where it's kind of a little bit more narrow on the top there. So let's kind of do that same thing where we just copy and paste, and we already have the deformer in place since we're just copying that original asset there. And then we can kind of move this down. Maybe similar to how we had the other ones, we'll just adjust that size there so it's a little bit smaller. And then we'll just copy and paste that one. And then just bring this one down. And then similar to what we've been doing, just kind of shrink this down a little bit. And then just kind of adjust this somewhere in the middle. Cool. So same thing here. We'll just highlight all of these, copy and paste. And then we're just going to rotate this 180 degrees, and we'll slide this over. And then we'll just kind of adjust it. But other than that, it's pretty darn symmetrical there. So that is looking pretty good as far as like the overall helmet goes. I'm just kind of rotating around here just to make sure that I'm kind of liking all this and everything is just kind of fitting proper. Yeah, I think it looks pretty good. I'm gonna go ahead and save it here. We could add some extra things here. We could maybe do something with this here. Maybe take this one and kind of move this over. And then we'll just turn this back off, and then we'll just go ahead and zoom in. And then we'll just bring this one down. Where could we put this here? We could put this around the top of the base here. Yeah, let's try that, see how that works. So let me rotate this here. And then I'm just going to go ahead and kind of move this and shrink this down. And maybe kind of attach it here somehow. Let's see, let's make this a little bit smaller and just kind of readjust this. Do, yeah, maybe something like that there. And then we'll try to make sure that that is nice and flush so it looks like it's actually connected there. And then I'm just trying to play with it to see what we can do. And I'm trying to make sure it's not breaking into anything else here. I think that looks fine, so I'm just going to copy and paste here. And again, just kind of adjust this maybe about there. Cool. Yeah, so I like that there. And then what we can maybe do is maybe do one of each on each side here. So let's go ahead and try and do that. I'm just going to copy and paste, move this over, and we're just going to rotate this. And then we're just going to copy and paste again. And then move this one over off to the other side. Cool. So with that, it looks like it is, you know, somewhat powered by something. And it also kind of looks a little bit busier as well too. So it can make it slightly more interesting here. But that is looking pretty good. Let's actually hop. So I think structurally that crown itself is looking pretty good. Let's actually go in and start editing some of this to kind of make it a little bit more unique here. All right, so next what we're going to do is we're going to play around with some of these materials here, and we're also going to put in some lighting here to kind of make it a little bit more our own. So I'm just going to go over to our lights, and we're going to get a dome light here. I'm just going to turn that off, and we'll hop into Grayscale Gorilla and maybe find a nice HDRI just for like an overall ambient light here. And I think something like this would be nice, something that is a little bit more lighter and bright here. And then I'm just going to bring in a Redshift camera and just kind of set it up here. And then I'm just going to go into Redshift here and turn this to 2K. And then as you can see, this asset is pretty broken here. So we'll just go in and turn on the geometry for a lot of these. So I'll just add a Redshift object tag and turn on a lot of this here. And that will kind of fix this here real quick. Cool. So this is our alien and our crown here, rather basic and somewhat flat, but we will kind of fix that here momentarily. So I'm just going to copy and paste and kind of bring that in there. So a little bit darker, but it kind of gives us more of a ambient room feel. Let me turn off our background there. And then let me jump into our default camera. For our lighting, it's going to be rather simple. I'm just going to bring in a area light here and maybe do something maybe to the bottom right. Or we could even do something up there as well. But I think something down here will kind of make a little bit more of some dynamic shadows as far as like the alien goes here. So I kind of like that in front, but a little off to the side. We'll go into our dome light and just increase our intensity to 2. And then we can always rotate our dome light here. And then what we can do is we can copy and paste that same area light here and just kind of turn this on, bring this up, and then we can kind of create some sort of cool lighting here on the top. Let me actually go into the light itself, and maybe we could do something like a sky here. So let me download the sky, and I'll paste this, and then I can just widen this out, and then we can maybe put this on the top here, Let's see. I'm just kind of seeing how the render view is reacting to this light here. So we can always just kind of change the lighting as well, where it's kind of coming in from this side. So we have one side of the crown here that is quite bright, and then we kind of get those shadows kind of wrapping around a lot of our cylindrical objects there. Or what I could do is, I think we could kind of take that and just kind of have it as like a backlight almost. And yeah, you get even a cooler look here as far as like seeing a lot of that really strong highlights here, and then kind of the light wrapping around the arches of the hat here. So that is quite nice. I think I like it at 100 here, and then we could just kind of back that up. And then I'm just going to turn that off and give it a quick save. And then what we could do is we could hop into our Redshift settings here, and we can maybe turn on a LUT, and then that's going to give us a slightly different look here. I think I kind of like this one here. I don't know why, but it kind of looks a little bit more organic here, or a little bit more lifelike, even though that's kind of weird to say for something like this. But let's stick with that, and then we can also turn on the bloom as well, just to kind of give it a nice little hazy look here, especially since this is something that is some sort of spiritual or just religious crown here. I think having that bloom effect really kind of goes with that same sort of vibe, or that same sort of look in general. So I kind of like that there. So I think the lighting overall is okay, but we definitely have to go in and change some of the colors here. So let's go in to the alien itself here, and let's actually save it real quick. And then we'll change this to more of a purple here. And then we could turn on the sheen there as well, just to kind of have more of a brighter look. And you can see how that affects the shadows within the clavicle area and around the eyes here. So depending on what look we want, we can kind of just adjust that. I think somewhere kind of near there is a little bit better, where we can still retain some of the shadows around the eye and the clavicle, but kind of have it a little bit more light there. And then we could maybe adjust this here. And then just kind of crank this up to give us a little bit more purples within the skin here. And then we can turn on this purple as well and kind of give it a overall like purple coat here. So it kind of has kind of a purple hue to the skin a little bit more. And then we'll just kind of adjust our sheen here. About halfway would probably be best there. So I think we are okay for the overall look of the alien. Again, the alien's not really the main subject here, but kind of giving us a nice place to put this crown here. So let's actually go into this one here. And we're just going to go in and kind of change how this tile is looking here. So I'm going to kind of stretch this out just so we can kind of see it. So for transmission, we can increase this, and that will allow us to kind of see through it a little bit more, or just kind of give it a little bit more of a glossy look here. So As you can see, it immediately turned that white, and I think a purple would look really nice with this. Yeah, I I actually like that quite a bit there. So let's see what 0.5 looks like. So I like the purple, but I don't know if I like it too bright. I kind of like some of the other colors kind of poking in there. So maybe like a 0.25 where we could still see that purple, but we can also see the other colors kind of in there as well. We can even like increase the sheen as well. But let's see here. Actually, what could look cool is we could go down to the emission and just kind of turn that on a little bit, just so it kind of looks almost like pearlescent at that point. So that is kind of a cool look as well. Depending on what direction we want to go in, we can kind of play around with that there. But I think I like that how it is, so we'll just kind of keep that purple like that. And then we could go into some of this metal here and go in and then just really just kind of push out more of the white color here. And then we'll go to all of these here. And again, just kind of give a white gloss. Just increase it so it kind of glows a little bit more. I think with doing a lot of this gloss over it, it will look a little bit more, I don't know, almost like mystical with how it's just a little bit more decorated versus just being like a standard like metal of some sort. And so having this kind of gloss finish around a lot of this material would look nice. And then of course, if we ever find a time to kind of play with the emission as well too, we could do something like that. But again, we'll just go into a lot of these here and just really just crank up the white. And then same with this one, we can throw in some emission, and we could throw in some emission here and then just really kind of crank up that white coat. So now that top is kind of completely white, or kind of has that white hue that kind of matches with our alien. I think that white and purple kind of matches really well. And then we can kind of bring in this backdrop here and kind of put this behind our alien. Again, nothing too crazy, but just something to kind of have as our backdrop. And I kind of like leaving it here where it's a little bit more like of a muted gray. Kind of goes well with the alien's skin, and then also with some of the white as well too. And then I think it really helps kind of bounce some of the light off of some of these colors here, so you get a really nice glow, especially with our bloom turned on. So that looks quite nice here. So I think that is pretty much it for this one. I'm just going to kind of take two different perspectives and kind of render this out. But that was pretty much it for this one today. Let me know what you guys think. I had a lot of fun with this. I think it's a fun, cool little concept where you can kind of take pre-existing assets and kind of create something that is very much your own and yourself. If you're getting started with Cinema4D, if you're not too confident with your sculpting skills, or just kind of having to learn how to kind of create some of this stuff, this can kind of be a fun way to kind of be both creative and also find something that you actually kind of like yourself. But yeah, we're going to keep rolling with this series here. We'll have a new prompt or new goal for each one. This one was a alien crown of some sort, and we use 3 different Kitbash kits here. And then these were the overall renders that I got here. So this was the first one here. And then we have the second one here to the right as well. So we have one That's kind of like a 3/4 shot here, and then just kind of like a straight on shot here as well too. So, but yeah, anyways, just let me know what you guys think. I had a lot of fun with this one. You guys have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you on the next one.